Hello students, I'm just recording this quick video tutorial because I've had a lot of questions about the outline template, specifically with the forecasting passage, but I just wanted to take a second and try to explain in depth what a forecasting passage is, show you an example in hopes that you can complete your outline template and then in turn complete your paper. So first, what I want to show you in our book is on page 224 as part of the reading. Your book gives you right here in figure 9.1 a framework for a classical argument. And the book kind of does this. It just gives you a basic skeleton outline of the different parts of your paper. It says you should have an introduction, a portion of your paper that presents your writer's position, portion that summarizes the opposing views, your response to the opposing views, and then a conclusion. And then over here it tells you what should be included in your introduction. Here it says you should include an attention grabber, an explanation of the issue, writer's thesis, and forecasting passage. And again, we're on page 224, so you may want to follow along in your books as I do this. This would probably be most helpful to you. So because this is not very helpful in terms of planning, it's great for an overview, but not really in terms of planning, I put this in our folder this week, which is sort of a template designed for you to fill in the blank, so to speak. After you've done all of your research and you have your argument, I took the information from the book here and then just created a template here. Now you'll notice, both in the book and on the template, the attention grabber is first, followed by an explanation of issue, writer's thesis, forecasting passage, and it goes all the way down throughout. It just follows that skeleton outline on page 224. You may notice on the classical argument outline template, I tell you don't worry about the attention grabber for right now, and do not worry about the conclusion for right now, because those parts are coming. But what you should be worried about, at least for your introduction, is your explanation of issue, your writer's thesis, and your forecasting passage. Now, I've received quite a few questions about what a forecasting passage is, and the book doesn't really go into great detail explaining what it is. But they do give a good example in the back of the book, or in the back of the chapter rather, with their sample paper. So I just wanted to take a moment and walk you through what a forecasting passage looks like, how it functions, in hopes that you'll be able to do your own. So first let me say that a forecasting passage is sort of exactly like a weather forecast. A forecast isn't what the weather is now. The weather forecast tells you what the weather is going to be. So the forecasting passage in your introduction forecasts to the reader what you're going to be spending the main body of your essay proving. It follows the writer's thesis because the thesis is eventually how you feel about your question, what your overall claim is, whether your claim is the Electoral College should be abandoned, or police officers should be required to wear body cameras, or we should repeal the Second Amendment in the wake of all this gun violence, or doctors should prescribe time outdoors rather than pharmaceuticals to fight the addiction problems people are facing. So what you're going to say is what you feel about this up here. The forecasting passage, what this does is it tells the reader up front why you feel the way you do. Then in this part of the paper, that's where you prove the reasons that you've given here for feeling the way you do with research. So let's take a look and see how this actually looks in practice. If you'll turn to page 234 in your book, there is a classical argument paper here, an example, right? And what I've done here is I have labeled the forecasting passage. This introduction follows the framework and the outline right here, in that it starts with an attention grabber, it explains the issue, it gives the writer's thesis, and then follows with a forecasting passage. So let's read this introduction very quickly. In 2012, more than 6.7 million students took at least one online course. Proponents of online education hope that such courses will improve the current educational system, but this potential is undermined by problems of reliance on technology. The 2013 Kaiser Family Foundation survey found that children and teens spend more than 53 hours using digital media every week, as cited in TOPO 2010. Educational programs that place more people behind more computers may not be the best way to improve education for the future, and we as a country seem to be at a critical decision-making point of whether to increase technology's role in our lives. So what they've done here is they've given an attention grabber in that they've told you 5 years ago more than almost 7 million students took online courses. Then they've sort of explained the background to this, right? How often people spend on online consuming digital media, how educational programs have tried to embrace that desire and provide courses online. Now we're getting to what the writer's thesis is. At this historical moment, I, as an environmental studies major concerned about my education and the well-being of the environment around me, believe the costs and consequences of online education must be evaluated based on how well it prepares students for the future engagement in the world. Now look at the writer's thesis right here. Although many people have great expectations for the possibilities of online courses, their negative repercussions ultimately outweigh the supposed benefits. This is the writer's thesis. So I'm just going to go ahead and highlight that. And then what I typically do, give myself a little key here so I know what I'm looking at. So what the writer is arguing here is that online courses are not as good as face-to-face courses. Now, if you were to say this in real life, well, I don't think an online course is as good as a face-to-face course, someone might ask you, well, why do you feel that way? This is where the forecasting passage comes in. This writer has done research and found 4 reasons why online courses are not as good as face-to-face. And she goes on to explain them here. Online courses are not the best way to educate students because, and then look what follows. First, the virtual classes are more expensive. Second, virtual classes promote inequality by requiring technology that's inaccessible to many of our fellow citizens. Third, technology courses are not as good because they inhibit the full development of critical thinking skills. And fourth, online classes further entrench our reliance on technology. So what the writer's done here is they've given their thesis here and given the reader already 4 reasons why they feel online courses are not as good. Then what happens if you look back to page 224, right? After the forecasting passage here, then you get into the presentation of your position. This is the main body of your essay. This is where you present and support each of the reasons listed in the forecasting passage. So, turn back, and here's what happens. After the forecasting passage, you'll notice the reason she gave. These virtual classes are more expensive. If you turn the page, starting right here at the bottom of page 236, the writer launches into the research that suggests that's true. Proponents who mistakenly believe that online education is cheaper also believe that its widespread accessibility will alleviate education inequalities, right? Here is where the writer on, right here, pages 3, it's page 3 for the fake paper here, pages 3 and 4, details the research that proves her first reason. And in fact, you can see source number 1 citation right here. So I hope that makes sense. If you go back to the forecasting passage, she said the second reason online courses aren't as good is because it promotes inequality by requiring technology that's inaccessible, right? Starting right here, however, the problem with believing that online courses create equality is that credit-bearing courses are too expensive and require technology that's simply not available to everyone. What she's done is actually flipped the reasons. She talks about inaccessibility here and expensiveness here. But what she's done here is she spends this part of the paper right? Starting right here with however on page 4, this part of the paper defending the second reason of the forecasting passage. And then you can see her source's citation by CL Self. This is an attributive tag up here, and then she puts the parenthetical page number down here. If you continue to read the sample paper, you'll see that the writer begins to defend the third reason at the top of page 5, and it goes on to page 6. Supporters also claim online courses are the best way to transform current educational practices. But then she gets into 2 sources right here that suggest it's not a good idea to take online courses because it doesn't get to those critical thinking skills. And then finally, if you go back here, the fourth reason online courses aren't good in the forecasting passage is that they further entrench our reliance on technology. By the time you get to page 6 of her paper, her last reason here, and it goes from pages 6 through 8, finally, advocates of virtual learning claim that online courses prepare students for the future by developing technological proficiency, which is needed in most applications. So you keep coming here, and then you can see there are several sources here. Here's her 6th source cited, her 7th, and her 8th defending this final reason why online courses are inadequate compared to face-to-face courses. So after reading the outline here, right, and seeing how the forecasting passage just lists the reasons for your thesis at the end of the introduction, by reading the sample paper here, you can see how the presentation of the writer's position sort of follows that, right? So in other words, tell the reader in your thesis what you think. Tell the reader in your forecasting passage why you think that way. And then tell the reader in the main body of your paper how you can prove that your reasons are correct. And that's where you would integrate all of your citations. So if you're having trouble with the forecasting passage, go ahead, watch this video, and take a look and see how the sample paper follows. And then just fill out your outline from there. You'll tell me what you think about your question. The main reasons go up here. And then when you come to the presentation of your position, you would just list out reason number 1 here. And then which source did you use for your preliminary research template that lists this reason. And then go to reason number 2, reason number 3, reason number 4, just like the book did. Okay? I hope this helps. If you have any further questions, please let me know.